in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, immediately the mother has sole legal and physical custody of that child. If the child is born out of wedlock, meaning that they're not married.
Did you call that baby a bastard?
You hopefully you wouldn't, but yeah, technically, if you want to go back to Old English, times, yeah, it would be a bastard child, a child without a father. Now it's up to the father. It's incumbent upon the father to step up and acknowledge that child in some capacity, whether it's by signing the birth certificate or by going to court. So when a man decides to do that, okay, because remember, we automatically know where that child came from. It came from the mother. There's no dispute there. But if a random guy decides to step up and say, I'm the father, by signing the birth certificate or by going to court and being acknowledged as the father, then he automatically assumes that responsibility. There's a case in Massachusetts called In Re Cheryl, where a guy, I think the child was about 5 years old. He later found out that it wasn't his. He went back to court to try to get the child support terminated. The court said, no, you've been acting as the father for the last 5 years. You've been there, supported that child. The child knows you to be the dad. I had cases like that too. It happens all the time. The only way you can get rid of that child support is if the mother and the biological father comes into the picture and he voluntarily replaces the guy that's not the actual father. That's the only way a judge here in Boston, Essex County, Middlesex County will ever remove a non-biological father from a birth certificate, is if mom and dad brings in the biological father to acknowledge the paternity. Right?
Yeah, no, and just to add on to that, Danny's right about that, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult because, like that case, if that non-biological father has been acting as the father, it's going to be tough. Courts don't want to get rid of or break relationships between a child and their parent, right? So they're going to try to avoid that. So now all of a sudden, if you're doing that to a 5 or 6 year old, the court is going to try to avoid that, because if you've been acting like the father this entire time, and now you're saying, no, I'm walking away, I'm not the father, well, the courts are going to not be very happy, let's just put it that way. They're going to lean toward not trying to do that. It's possible, but it's very difficult.
Okay, so first and foremost, one of the things we know is that the Commonwealth does like breaking up families, and that's why we have child services. Second of all, so let's say, for instance, this man had sex with this woman, but this woman also had sex with other men. He thought he was the father. He signed the birth certificates under the pretense that he was the father. But the broad was laid out with so many different men. Having him claim the baby as his was the viable choice. Why isn't she held to some type of legal capacity? Because she led him to believe, under the pretense that whether they were married or just dating, that he was the daddy, and 5 years into it, you want to sit here and tell me you're not the father. We do a paternity test, and you're absolutely right, I'm not the daddy. How then am I still at fault and still have to claim child support, but yet I was lied to? Are there any laws on the book that say, listen, you stole the condom, you was a turkey baster, now I'm a daddy, I didn't agree to this?
Honestly, it's basic contract law 101. Let me tell you this: if you sit on your hands, if you have rights and you're sitting on those rights and you do nothing about it, okay, and then you try to come back into court 3, 4, 5 years later, then there's what's called attenuation of time. There's too much time has passed for you to try to exercise those rights. If you suspect that that child is not yours, you take a paternity test within a year of that child being born. You'll be fine. Even if you signed the birth certificate at the hospital, even if you went later on 3 or 4 days later and signed the birth certificate, or even went to court to be acknowledged as the father, if it's within a certain period of time, the court will take you off. It's the situations where years go by, and that whole time people telling you the kid don't look like you, your mama don't think the kid look like you, and you still there supporting that child. At that point, you have an obligation. You embraced it. So how then can you come and say, you know what, I'm not gonna be your father anymore because there's the next dude that's your father? You can't, and honestly, I wouldn't support that either. If I'm sitting there acting as the father and I'm sitting there raising that child to be mine, frankly, it doesn't matter what a piece of paper says. At that point, that's my son. And I think a lot of men feel that way too. But it's when mother gets vindictive and she takes it to court and hits you with that $250 child support obligation. That's when you're like, wait a minute now. I've been doing this naturally by myself. I mean, for myself, with no other reason or other than the fact that I love this kid. And you're gonna go take me to child support. And now that you know it's not mine, you're not gonna take me off. It's not the conversation of the man or the court. Why is the female doing that to him? You see what I'm saying? And that's the problem with a lot of brothers going to these courts, and I feel so bad because the system is not set up for us. The system was set up in the 70s and 80s because there was a lot of men who were not taking responsibility. And you and I talked about this before. I did not talk about this before. Times have changed. The laws have to change. I'm not saying that there's not an occasion where they have truly deadbeat fathers, whether the child is yours or not. You see what I'm saying? There are occasions where they have truly deadbeat fathers, but I think the landscape have changed so much, and men get systematically screwed in court. It's so bad that I think the law needs to be changed. It needs to be adjusted. It really does, because the females in court, I hate to say it, they have a lot of power.